Hello.
Oh, welcome to week 12 of Hot Pot Talk Season 2. We have finally arrived at the finale. My name is Jen Sunshine, here with my dear friend and longtime creative partner, David Ng. We are the co-artistic directors of Love Intersections, a media arts collective that produces documentary films about QT BIPOCs. We're also members of the Vancouver Artists Labor Union Cooperative, also known as Value Co-op. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that David and I are beaming this episode of Hot Pot Talks from the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Part of our work as labor activists and queer artists on unceded territories means working in solidarity with ongoing Indigenous struggles for sovereignty, decolonization, reparations, and land back. Hot Pot Talks is a weekly series live streaming to YouTube and Facebook every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, where we have free-flowing conversations with artists, activists, chefs, performers, poets, community organizers about what it means to be an artist facing today's realities, what ethical responsibilities do we have as artists. This season, we continue these conversations on topics ranging from anti-Asian racism, BIPOC futurity, Chinatown solidarity, diasporic food cultures, and interrogating the boundaries between everyday activism, fine art, and cultural work.
Yeah, we founded Love Intersections on the philosophy of collaboration, invitation, and relationship building with and within communities to tell intergenerational and intersectional stories. And a core part of our work as social practice artists has been to interrogate the boundaries of art, philosophy, community work, and activism. And when the pandemic put a pause on a lot of our creative and community work, Jen and I created Hot Pot Talks as a joyous way to continue this dialogue on art and cultural production with people we are inspired by. And now in thinking about these themes of community nourishment and love, we wanted to pitch our merch line again. We designed a series of Have You Eaten Today merch. Have You Eaten Today simply means I love you in BIPOC language. A simple question asked by so many of our parents, elders, and aunties everywhere. It evokes a shared familial understanding of love and tenderness. These feelings of unspoken care inspired Hot Pot Talks, where culture and community nourish our bodies and for our hearts too. And we got these totes that were printed hot off the press.
And I'm wearing the t-shirt. The quality, my webcam makes the color, like the temperature, kind of weird. So it's actually the same color as David is holding up. It's like a neon green. Yeah. It just looks weirdly gray or white on my end.
And this calligraphy actually says, "Have you eaten today?" and is actually Jen's dad's calligraphy. So, designed by Value Co-op member Annie Canto. Before we begin, I guess there's no introduction. There's no guest today, so no introduction. We want to thank our incredible team, Cameron, our lead project coordinator, and Lamia, our social media coordinator, who helped make Hot Pot Talks a reality. So Jen, just me and you today, so we can maybe like that.
Oh my God, this is a little much, but I'm embracing it. Fine. I want to start off the bat by wishing you, David, a happy birthday, because today is your birthday. You
35.
Mid-30s, finally. I've been waiting for this day. I turned 35 earlier this year in May, and I was just waiting for August to come around so that you and I can finally be equals.
Mid-30s. So I have to say that I've been spoiling myself. I got a massage and a facial. So I'm actually feeling a little bit like
relaxed.
Very relaxed. So I'll try to give this conversation my all, but I'm feeling very relaxed right now.
If astrology isn't real, then how do you ever explain why Leos all have impeccable, perfect hair? And my understanding is that you were at the salon yesterday.
Yes. She's gray now.
She's gray. So, because you were pink earlier, and you've always been doing the pinks and the purples and the blues. Why the gray, the light gray?
I'm traveling. And the pink is within Canada, but the pink is, I don't like to draw attention too much to myself, surprisingly, as a Leo. there's just navigating a new space and then drawing so much attention to yourself, but then there's also the like queer thing as well. Yeah, I've had pink hair in other spaces when I've traveled, and it just makes things a little bit more complicated. Let's just put it that way. You know,
You don't want to be hate crimed.
I don't want to be hate crimed. Is what I'm saying. Yeah.
You're like traveling in Canada, though.
I know, and it's not
I get it.
It's not like a flaming gay Asian with bleach blonde hair is any less. But in my mind, the pink is less, or the blonde is less than the pink.
So how do you feel now that you are 35 years old? What was your birthday wish this year?
My birthday wishes, I generally have like more like of a resolution, you know? I kind of, Jen, we've been talking about this a lot, but like, I feel like, and I've just been, and this isn't necessarily a complaint, but we've gotten to the point where our practices, like their partnerships and collaborations are coming like from all different angles, frankly.
Yeah.
And I really want to think more intentionally about what is the work that we want to do. I think, even when we started Love Intersections, and we had a conversation with another organization earlier this week. This week has flown by. But we're talking about like, when we started Love Intersections and started making short documentaries about QT BIPOCs, it was really about, and figuring out our ethic and process was really about decentering ourselves, but also recognizing that as filmmakers, we're also a part of telling the story as well. But also like, I'm trying to think of like, what is our story that we're trying to put forward, and what are we trying to do? I think Hot Pot Talks, this project that we came up with during the pandemic, has also been a way that I've been thinking through, like, what is it that I want to say and what and tell about, my story.
So clearly you've gotten wiser, more insightful and smarter.
Yes. I'm all philosophical now about birthdays and aging.
I mean, I think you and I have talked at length about our internal psyches and fears of getting older, because certainly I don't have the same energy that I used to have, when I was in my 20s, which is not uncommon. But I think like sometimes I fear that you and I have become more jaded in our, like, as we become more intentional about who we are, what we say, what we put out there, being less kind of callous about our art making, that everything is done kind of ethically, responsibly. Like we can no longer, not to say that we can't experiment or push certain boundaries, which we also do, but we do it carefully and intentionally, right? As opposed to perhaps in the past, we were just like, well, we can just have fun and be a little kind of blasé about it.
Yeah. Well, are there, like, Jen, we were talking about this earlier. Are there, like, what I'm feeling is, I'm feeling the generational. I'm heading into a generation where that I don't fully understand the younger generations, and I'm really, really, really trying to interrogate that a lot, because I don't know. I don't want.
Well, you don't want to be a boomer.
that or how we were treated by
other generations,
right? Like that, where these millennials don't know what they're talking about. They're just lazy and aren't working hard enough, so that's why they can't. They eat too much avocado toast, so that's why they can't afford a house, right? I mean, I know that's an extreme example, but I don't want to do that to Gen Z and to Alpha Gen neither. I'm wondering, do you have what are your feelings around?
Well, that's why I asked that question with every single guest that comes on Hot Pot Talks, is like, what has been their insight or observation in terms of how different generations approach and strategize and think about activism and queerness and self and like who they are in relation to like the global context, you know? That's why I'm fascinated by that question, because I'm so curious about not just intergenerational knowledge exchange, but also like what are some fundamental differences in how different people think.
Yeah.
But like I have fears, but I'm also thinking back in like when I was younger and feeling so like now I look back with a kind of embarrassment. I'm also just easily embarrassed about everything that I do and say in general. So that's not like a generational thing. That's a gen thing.
Yeah.
But I think about the times where maybe an elder, and by elder I mean like someone who was maybe like 5 to 10 years older, pulling me aside or like doing, saying some things like, oh, you wait, right? Just you wait till you get to a certain age. Yeah. And I always kind of just poo-poo that. And, I'm like, well, what do you know? What do they know? But actually that there is so much wisdom in like experience and like the accumulation of years that's added to like how we think about things and how do we approach our own like ethics and philosophies in relation to what's going on in the world. So like I've just become slower and more like thoughtful in how I want to present myself in the world. And I think it really it mirrors like love intersections and how you and I have approached love intersections work. Because I think when we started, we were very much in the like, let's do this representational work, because we didn't see ourselves on the big screen. So let's start there. But it has since then grown and evolved into much more like deeper relationship, collaborative work that is far beyond just kind of like tokenistic gestures of representation.
Yeah.
I'm using tokenistic gestures because you love to say so David Ng has 2 words that
every year
that she has overused this year. And this year it's logics and gestures, which are amazing words, by the way. But those are
if anyone's playing a drinking game, every time I say those words.
But and even too on the subject, speaking of drinking, like I will be approaching my 1-year sobriety in September in like 3 weeks. And I'm very proud. I'm very proud of myself for making that decision almost a year ago to just, and I just quit cold turkey. I didn't waver. I was like, it's time, The pandemic, I think at the early start of the pandemic really revealed that I had unhealthy coping mechanisms, and I was like stuck at home and drinking daily. It was not healthy. But I also can't blame the pandemic because this has been a long time coming. Like, working in the queer community, it is not uncommon to develop like a unhealthy relationship to alcohol, right? And substance abuse, like all of that.
Yeah. We were talking about this in terms of like how we challenge ourselves. Because I've been also thinking like every like September and January, I try to do, I do not a cleanse where I don't eat, but I go on like a really strict diet is the wrong word, but it's really just to sort of bring myself back to a discipline of like thinking actually like, what am I putting in my body, right?
Yes.
Because so often like I'm just, just making, or cooking and eating, but also just being intentional about what I'm putting in my body.
Well, you've been doing this vegetarian thing, which is amazing.
Yes.
You should be proud of yourself.
Yes. So my partner has been bugging me to try to at least eat vegetarian or vegan Monday to Friday. And for years, like we would do this in January as like a 1 month New Year's resolution thing. But I've kind of found a really good rhythm and the things that I like Asian flavors, like vegetarian or vegan Asian flavors, and lots and lots of textures. So like a Buddha bowl. Yeah. The only thing that makes that complicated though is like now instead of making like I meal prep, so I make things at the beginning of the week for the whole week. Now instead of making like 3 or maybe 4 things, I'm making like 10. 10 or 11 because there's like all these little components.
Well, this is the thing. It's like, vegetarianism, it actually like widens the scope of what like the ingredients that you're working with because you have to be so creative. And there's like so much to explore out there. The only thing is that you have to use a lot more variety in ingredients. And
I have this like tiny, I really want a bigger fridge because I have this like
the
tiniest fridge. So literally my fridge is just full of containers. When we were making the hot pot when we were selling hot pot packs. Remember, I bought all those groceries,
Yeah, I
and
remember.
nothing fit. So anyway,
You of all people need like several fridges and
yeah,
a separate like deep freezer.
yeah.
Yeah.
One day, one can dream.
I want to talk about, well, we should probably, talk about the season of Hot
Yes.
Pot
Yeah.
Talks in
Mhm.
terms of like it's season 2. So the initial like nerves and kind of experiment and just generally like it just the first season was so kind of like thematic.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this season and what did you like about this season compared to last? What was different from season 1? What would we do differently for season 3?
Yeah. Well, Jen, I'm remembering when we were conceptualizing season 2, we struggled. We took like weeks, and I kind of wanted to trace from what happened from season 1 to season 2, or our journey from season 1 and season 2. Season 1 was really like grew out of our work engaging Chinatown.
Mm-hmm.
So this collaboration we're doing with the Lim Association through our work with Value Co-op, and a lot of the artworks that we were gonna make this, and fingers crossed that we're gonna actually do this in February next year. I'm putting out that energy. We were gonna turn some of the artworks through the archival research that we're doing with the Lim Association,
Yeah.
and turn it into like this immersive visual art exhibit that invites people to learn about the living history of the building, the association, and the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And so Hot Pot Talks was sort of a manifestation of it, in that we were going to have dialogues about those themes. But I think at the end of season 1, we realized that like the themes of like diaspora, racism, art, culture, cultural identity. Yeah, I said diaspora. Those themes are linked, like they intersect
Mm-hmm.
with so many other structural,
Mm-hmm.
systemic stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll mention just a little piece of what I'm studying in part of my research at school is also linked to this exact thing, and it's what we've been thinking through some of our writing as well. But like thinking about how certain stories are illegible or made illegible
Yeah.
outside of the norm, right?
Yeah.
Those themes of being made illegible, marginalized, erased stories intersect with cultural identity, diaspora. I'm just looking at some of our other guests, like colonization, how certain art forms like drag are not seen as fine art, or
Mm-hmm.
are not legible in the contemporary art world in the same
Mm-hmm.
way that other types of visual art are. And so I think that we started realizing that, like, yes, Chinatown and the Engaging Chinatown project was the initial impetus to have these conversations. The conversations are actually systemic and structural. It's kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll also just mention, like, it was also a learning from the last episode when talking about anti-Asian racism and going through that sort of journey of recognizing and reading Dylan Rodriguez,
Mm-hmm. Last
our
guest.
last guest, his writing around like the ethical obligation to abolition of prisons and police, in doing anti-racist work. And so
Mm-hmm.
all of these sort of interconnected systemic and structural pieces, I think that we're starting to realize that these conversations are all connected, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Chinese people, and it should not be just
Mm-hmm.
people
Mm-hmm.
in the Chinese diaspora or connections to Chinatown that are having these having these conversations about these issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's intersectional, right? To
Mm-hmm.
state the obvious, but
Yeah, one thing that I would love to have changed because I definitely for myself hit a what's the word? A plateau maybe, or I hit something. I think it was like an episode or two too long for season 2.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
we could have shortened it and kept it the same length in terms of number of guests as
yeah,
season 1, because yeah, and then just the kind of like every week there's this consistent thing. I found myself sometimes like,
Yeah.
oh, because it takes up, your entire day. So every
Yeah.
Wednesday, this is like the thing that you're dedicated to. And
Well,
in season 1, I was like, great, this is some consistency and structure that I needed.
yeah.
But then in
Yeah.
season 2, I found myself weary, a little bit tired.
Yeah. I think the live component too, because it's quite like 12 live. I mean, these will live.
Yeah.
These will live on YouTube and on TELUS on demand
Community channel.
channel. But we added the layer of the live, right?
Yeah. And then just also we can't, I think you and I are both perfectionists as well. And so not being able to control the quality of other people's like sound and image has been difficult, I think, for us.
Yeah.
Which is also not something we can control for future seasons, right? Like you just have to be okay with it.
Yeah. Oh, and girl, we launched a second merch line. Like this.
Okay, so we also have been thinking about this. I think this was a suggestion, or we had talked about this at some point, is for future seasons, maybe season 3, I don't know. But to have past guests come back and be in conversation with us or each other. I think that would be really interesting. And then and it speaks to like our ethos in terms of whoever is entangled in our circle, we bring them along every step of the way, and the relationship, deepens.
Yeah, because like I would love to put Kai Cheng Tom with Dylan Rodriguez, because they're doing different work, but I'm so interested in Kai writes about heavily about abolition in her book I Hope We Choose Love. And I'm curious, like putting the conversation around abolition and Dylan with someone doing transformative justice. That type of conversation would be super cool too.
Yeah, it was so good. I learned so much from Dylan's episode. I actually watched it like back twice just to even understand a sliver of like the theory, like I was like, oh, I gotta read more, and and I confess to not being up to date in my theory to begin with, so there is a bit of that imposter syndrome, but I know I can read and I know I can grasp complex thoughts, so like I know I can
I mean, let's not don't downplay yourself. We have 3 upcoming academic publications that we have to write in the next 3 months.
Okay, so not to toot our own horn, but I would like to actually read out some of the publications that we were invited to contribute.
One of them is about Hot Pot Talks. Which
I think whoever it was that found Hot Pot Talks and then invited us to write about queerness and food, like. Amazing, because then we can reference the guests and like actually tap into the like Hot Pot Talks series intelligence, like Tao Lee Goff. We can tap into her research around food, which we're definitely going to cite to death in our chapter. Another chapter I think we're writing is for what's the ethics? What? Oh yeah, the storytelling ethics and social justice. This is for like wait, is this not? Can we know?
It's fine.
Okay, I wasn't sure if we're like not supposed to tell people. Yeah.
Well, maybe I don't know, but maybe we can talk about. Let's talk about maybe the "Have You Eaten Today" article.
Which one?
The
one that we're writing.
The one that we're writing. So it's actually pretty, it's kind of interesting because it's in a book called Queering Nutrition and Dietetics, LGBTQ Reflections on Food Through Art. And I'm quite excited about it because it's from the School of Nursing in Dalhousie. And Jen and I, so we are drawing from our past guest, PhDJ Tao Lee Goff. I actually pulled up her quote because she talks about, Tao's exploring this theme of gastropoetics, and she describes the materiality of food as a sensorium to open up alternative forms of knowledge production from the colonial archive. And so we're abstracting a little bit because we're not necessarily doing looking at the archive, but I love this idea of like food and senses as a way of theorizing about queerness and culture and identity, right? Outside of just like writing theory, right? Actually thinking about sensing and yeah, and food and taste and digestion, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because so much of what we do, like I can't even place or name specifically, but it is a sensing, and it is like a kind of feeling. Like, how do we feel in our gut? How do we feel in how we do things and approach things and be in conversation with each other? How does that feel? And I learned that through facilitation. Being a facilitator is like I'm constantly observing the room and feeling what everyone else is feeling or trying to.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like this is the sort of why we've really been, you know, at the core of Love Intersections was really trying to think about like, you know, the impetus was to do anti-racist work, but through storytelling, because we wanted it to sort of convey a different like empathy and a different sense and feeling, right? It's not just about giving people the language about anti-racism. People have the internet, right? But it's also about how do we use art to shift, you know, feelings too? Because
it was cut you off.
Go ahead.
It was Dylan who said something like that to us. I think in our post live stream where we were just saying goodbye. And he said something about how we're modeling or we're just showing or it's you know, we tell too, but we're definitely showing and modeling.
Yeah.
I want to also talk about some of the like how we've grown artistically. But okay, so maybe I'll say this because I wanted to show what we installed today.
Yes, it's so exciting. Do it. I'll start talking about it.
Okay,
as you pull it up.
Yeah, okay.
So this is an installation that we just put up today. I'm so happy with how it turned out.
Yeah.
It's going to be a part of the Chinatown, and I can never pronounce this, biannual. The Chinatown biannual.
Well, we kept saying Biennale, or you kept saying Biennale because we want to sound European or like whatever.
That's what I was told. Anyways, this piece is launching on Saturday. It's up already, but the video piece will launch on Saturday. It's a part of the Chinatown biannual, it features some illustrations about the if folks in Vancouver remember last year after the a lot of the incidences of vandalism in Chinatown, an anonymous artist flower bombed
Happy birthday!
Oh my God. I was like, Nathan, I'm going to kill you. Why are you coming in here during hot talk?
Johnny, get in.
We're using flower bombing. Happy birthday. These are from Jen.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, but it is an amazing story. Can we get Johnny? Can you tell Johnny to come in here?
Flowers ever.
You can't. Johnny can't hear. Hold on. Let me.
Okay. So this is an incredible story that I am so excited to share with people.
For you, but it is somewhere outside because it.
Okay, that's fine.
Cool. Yeah, one sec. Let me just switch this to. I was like, Nathan, how dare you?
So.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So, David, you're gonna flip. So this was the first time Johnny and I synced. Okay, so three weeks ago, I was like, I want to do something for David's birthday. David's birthday happens to be on the finale of Hot Pot Talks. I would like to deliver flowers because you love flowers so much.
I do. They're beautiful.
Yeah. So I hit up Nathan, your husband, and I was like running this idea by him, being like, would you be okay? Because obviously I can't be in two places at the same time, and I don't want the delivery person to interrupt the live stream. So it would have to be Nathan, right? And he was like, yeah, it's cool. I'll just make some excuse not to go to boxing where he said that you usually banish him from the apartment, right?
I do. That's why I did the
So you know, we 2 weeks later, like last week, I was like thinking, and I was going to bed, and I was like, okay, I don't want to force Nathan to do this. This is a lot to ask, and I was like, ooh, what about Johnny? Because like he was the first guest of the season, and if he interrupts, because we're all really tight friends, it would make the circle complete. So I go to bed making this decision, right? I was like, okay, I'll ask Johnny and see if he's open to it. Guess what? The next morning, I wake up. It's like 4 or 5 in the morning. I'm just checking my phone messages, and I get this message on Messenger from Johnny, who was like, I don't know, what did you say? You're like, how do you feel? Like, what if I surprise David? What if I surprise David during the live stream on Hot Pot Talks? And I was just floored. Like, get out of here! We synced. It's amazing.
Thank you guys.
So I was like.
It was funny because it was just like, it just was this random thought that came into my mind. I was like, I gotta check with Jen. No, she's not down. This is not gonna go well. And Jen was like, oh my god.
I flipped out because David, as you know, you and I sync on things like this all the time. Like we literally will have the exact same thought popping up at the exact same time. So the fact that Johnny and I did it, it was just beautiful. And so I was like, let's do this.
Thank you. That's so sweet. we synced today too, Jen, with the title of the piece, Flourish.
Oh yeah. So okay, now I can show the Chinatown biannual photo. So we were invited, we actually put in a submission to Chinatown biannual and hoping that we would get accepted. We got accepted, and so this piece that we had developed for the Mao calendars, where we adapted it to be this window installation. So I'm gonna quickly share the screen.
Have you seen? Yeah, the window looks fantastic.
Yeah. So it's at the window at the front of the Value Co-op.
And it was designed. So this is a part of one of the Mao calendar designs, and the theme is myths and legends, I think.
Look at this.
The illustrations are by Value Co-op member Shira Anisman and River, Iron Eagle. Yeah. Yay.
And this is the process. So beautiful. So excited.
So it features on the screen. It's not up right now, but it's going to have a performance piece that we did or Kendall did, Made in China did, as a part of Yellow Peril Queer Destiny, the film that we did, and it's an ancestral veneration ceremony at Larwell Park, which was the site of the start of the anti-Oriental riots in 1907. And so the floral lions are just sort of to signify the flower bombings that happened last year.
Yeah. And then so I was walking home from the install being like, we still need a title for this piece for the Mao calendar for this month. And so I was like, what about Flourish? And David had the exact same thought, because the train of thought is pretty natural, blooming, flower, floral to flourish. So it makes
I was originally thinking a blooming resiliency, but then that infers that it wasn't blooming before. So I was like, okay, maybe not.
Some flowers have multiple blooming cycles.
True.
Like it's plants, the roots.
Yeah. Some of them need to be set on fire to bloom.
Can I see the flowers again?
Yes.
Because I was very proud of the selection.
when she brought it over, I was like, are these the flowers for like the shop for the day? Like, and my first thought was like, they're the most extra flowers I've ever seen. They're perfect.
Only equally extra for equally extra girl. So yeah.
And I'm so glad. No Gerber daisies.
Well, so I, you know what? I forgot that part. I knew that you didn't like daisies, and I forgot to ask them.
They're
but you know,
beautiful.
I was so upset because I didn't know that your favorite flowers, peonies, the coral kind.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they were not in season. And so I was like, oh, where can? And then you actually told me they weren't in season.
Yeah.
So I was like, darn.
Actually, that's a funny story, Jen. We should tell that story. So, my favorite flowers are peonies, and then you were like, yeah, those are the ones that are going to be at your funeral, right? And I'm like, oh yeah. And then I was like, but they only bloom in June. So I said, well, I'll have to schedule my own day.
And I said that, you know, listen, if David has to schedule his death and he goes first within the blooming season of like May to June, then if I'm still alive, then I will make sure to theater manage his funeral to make sure that there are coral peonies present.
If we were going to think of anybody that was going to overproduce their own death,
it would be David.
like I'm sure there's like a Google task list for both.
Totally.
Absolutely. Like Johnny, you'll have a role designated. I'll have a role designated. David will have it all kind of like fleshed out. Whereas for me, I just want someone to put me in those like mushroom cocoons where you become enveloped into fungi and you just become mushrooms into the earth. That's what I would want.
Amazing.
Okay, so I had not planned after what we were doing after the surprise.
Do I like off now? Do I like awkwardly like turn off camera?
Well, it's the finale, like it's cash. So do you have to go anywhere?
Why don't we? Any past episodes that stuck out to the three of us?
Oh,
memorable moments.
Yes.
For me, it was the Chi Yi's story of the Winnipeg hot pot, where they would have the hot pot with like minus 40 and wearing coats, windows open.
It's such a Winnipeg thing too. Right?
Really?
Like, it's like, oh yeah, I can see that happening in many communities. Like, just embrace the coldness of this bitter place.
I barely remember the Chi episode because I was very ill from the second shot of the vaccine. That one just about did me over. I had a high fever. I think I still had a fever that morning of that Hot Pot Talk day. Yeah. It was bad.
Well, I've also been really thinking about like, so the episode with Paul and Dana.
Mm-hmm.
That episode when they were talking about how some of the early fights around diversity and inclusion and anti-racism. Ooh, this is very low. A lot of cleavage.
I mean,
girl, like, come on.
Tell us.
Come on.
But I was thinking about like when they were talking about their like early fights around anti-racism and the arts, and like specifically that the Minchon Panchayat situation that happened. That conversation came up again recently in a project that I'm doing around anti-racism and decolonization in the arts. And they said, well, actually, when we, so it was a conversation around like the new newer younger artists or the newer generation not realizing that there have been battles already fought. And this wasn't like a poo-poo you young people, but it's kind of like, it's actually kind of sad that like, you know, all of this work, they're having to redo the work every generation, right? And this came up in a conversation where that situation that happened at Minchon Panchayat, where there was a really big rupture in the, I think it was actually artist-run centers community, that still rings as, or holds as sort of like as a part of the genealogy of decolonizing and anti-racism work in the arts. So I've been really thinking about that because, you know, Jen, you know, the work that we're doing at Value and you know, with Love Intersections, really trying to think about like, yeah, how do we change that? How do we archive better? How do we maybe create, yeah, how can we change that? How can we do something about that so that, you know, Gen Z and Alpha Gen also have like a whole bunch of tools available and accessible. You know?
When we talk about these like struggles that we've gone through as they were like far in the past, where the people who experience them are right next door from us, they often don't have these spaces to connect and hear the stories and learn about, you know, progress and tackling institutional structures of oppression is it's a constant battle. We're always having to do this. And I remember like when I started coming up in activism and then connecting with you and jamming on activism and pushing, sometimes feels like we're reinventing that wheel and we're having to do it all over again. When like I mean, I guess Paul now can say we can call him an elder, but like our elders are they're still here, they're living with us. And so how do we create that community and learn those lessons, particularly to combat the burnout and fatigue that we all face in these struggles.
Well, I'm thinking just even about some of the grant that we're applying for Value Co-op, like part of that sort of so we're putting together this project where we want to sort of evaluate, archive, and then create a resource so that other co-ops that are trying to do something like this don't have to necessarily start from scratch like we did. So I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, you know, how do we knowledge share, recognizing that it's also not cookie cutter too, right? Like, you know, people from different organizations in different ecologies and communities elsewhere are going to have their own context to grapple with, but there's certainly a lot of learnings that we can
still learning.
Yeah, exactly. So I also have a lot of imposter syndrome when people are curious about learning about value too. I mean, you know, I think we've, not to downplay all of the wonderful things that we have been able to achieve, but you know, I'm still also feeling very fresh. We're still learning so much too.
Yeah.
Okay, can I have David back now? Bye, Johnny. Thank you so much for. Thank you so much.
That was hilarious. Thank you guys.
Oh my God. Okay, put your speakers or your audio back on.
Well, what do you want to? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, Jen? While I put this on.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think I would like to go back to school, but I fight that every day. Like every year I want to go back to school. And then I am like, hell no, I'm not doing that. I'm not, because I saw firsthand what grad students go through. I see what you go through. I saw all the grad students go through when I was working at a higher institution. And it's just, it just kills you, you know? And it sucks the life and soul out of you. But I want to learn. And I want to be in a context where I can stack ideas with people. Yeah.
And I mean, you know, I said this to you, and I'll say it also for the record as well. I mean, you are literally, we're writing,
I know,
like the like really like contributing to the discourse in a really, really, I think, critical and important way. Like so part of my research interest is thinking about like how, I'm going to use the word logics, but what are the logics of exclusion? You know, so Jen, for you and I, for Love Intersections, the logics of exclusion that say that art from people of color are not at the same value as other types of, you know, white visual, art or whatnot? How can we actually interrogate those systems that say that our social practice of community facilitation and this type of art, this more grassroots processed art making, has a very, 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 very different value, and that those logics are connected to the logics that exclude art as a form of knowledge production, right?
Yeah.
So I'm doing a research creation, or at UBC it's called a critical creative research dissertation. So part of it is, so I have a written dissertation, and then there's an artistic output that is also a piece of knowledge production. But I'm going to cite Natalie Lovelace actually asks us, like, why are we just trying to fit art into the institution that excluded us in the first place? So this is all the way to go back to saying, like, I think let's not also downplay what we're doing in terms of being critical about the art system that excludes or relegates or puts into a certain category certain types of art, right? We got to, and this is again linked to the conversation we were having earlier about Hot Pot Talks too, right? And the boxes of thinking about diaspora and culture and philosophy and contemporary art. It's there's connections to those systemic and structural pieces that we're writing and doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think another piece that I've been thinking about too, and this is kind of linked to my year of sobriety, is that I've been doing like a serious kind of self-inventory brought on by my sobriety, because all of a sudden things are clearer, I have more energy, and I'm thinking about things in a different way that isn't about what substance I turn to.
Right.
So I'm looking around my life and myself and just making a list, like what is it that I want to be? Who do I want to be and become? Which isn't to say I don't know who I am now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade. I'm always the best version of me than I was yesterday, right?
Yeah.
But I think in 5 years, because right now what I'm struggling with is visibility, is that you and I continue to be more and more visible in different ways, in different arenas, in different streams of whatever. But I'm still so PTSD from like queer visibility, like from 5 years ago, where I was so hyper visible in the queer world, where I'm still reeling from the effects of that, and feeling exposed and vulnerable, I think is what I'm feeling constantly. So anytime someone asks to do an interview where they want to like interview me, oh my God, there's an airplane or a helicopter. I'm always like, isn't there somebody else? Because I don't want to constantly be the default option. If someone wants to talk to someone who's like a woman and queer and Asian,
Yeah. Well, it's reminding me of that conversation that we had with Kai, actually, right? And thinking about like, I think you asked her, how do we deal with fame and the not recognition, but visibility.
Yeah.
And she said something that really stuck with me. There's a difference between fame, because she said, I've never wanted to be famous, and I've never wanted to be famous. But there's a difference between fame and wanting an audience, right? And for example, Hot Pot Talks, right? Like we want people to watch it. That's why we put so much effort into marketing, so that we can engage. And so I've been really thinking about that a lot too.
So what do you want to be in 5 years?
I don't know. I started the PhD. I'm in my third year. I started it not really knowing where it would take me. At the time, I really, really did not want to teach, but I've really sort of come around to it during the pandemic, I think.
You'd be an amazing teacher.
Yeah, and I feel like you've heard me lament as I'm marking, as I'm teeing, but what really actually, I thought about it a lot over the past week when we were talking about call out culture, and Dylan and all the three of us were talking about like how, if today we would have been canceled for all the, shitty things that we might have said in our, late teens and early 20s, and a lot of like this generation doesn't have a lot of that sort of, we don't have that sort of grace for those.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been really thinking about that because, yes, there's a lot of frustrating things that I have to read, but if my profs weren't gracious to me for this crap that I wrote, I would not be here right now and doing my PhD.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I just want to, I want to be able to do that in an educational setting. So it's shifted my,
Yeah. But that being said too, I think also like there was so much more space and time, and like when you're talking about that grace, that gracefulness and the graciousness rather, there was more space for that back then. There is no room for that because things move at such a speed, like it just is impossible, like you and I have talked about how we want to put a lot of energy and effort into mentorship, and it often is very clunky, right? Because there's no room, like the world moves in the speed that is very, very fast. And we're contending with a lot, schedules, time, like it's always a nightmare. So I don't even think like there are structural support that is necessary for a kind of graciousness that we experience growing up.
I'm also just thinking like what Paul Wong said about like giving people a space. They were talking about when they were younger artists. Dan and Paul were talking about when they were younger artists, like just people every weekend, artists would just get together and experiment, right? And I think that we had that evolved into a conversation. Right, you were asking about mentorship, and that was one of the things that Paul also brought forward was like, just creating a space for people to make mistakes, and that has really, really stuck with me. Like, in that mentorship is like creating that space for people just to make mistakes, and then ask you questions, right? But then have that safe space to make mistakes too.
Well, we extend that graciousness to other people, but we don't extend that graciousness to ourselves necessarily. Because I think you and I are not so subtly too perfectionistic, like we have high expectations on ourselves, and then it like it reaches, we have such impossible standards.
But I also think we talk about this sometimes too. The impossible standards intersects with the call out culture too. We literally have a channel on Discord called Troll Management. Thank you, Cameron and Lamia, for managing the trolls. Thankfully, we haven't had that many. But it's that type of sort of like thinking that sort of sometimes I think impedes our creativity too. And that's maybe I'll also add to what I want to envision in the next year, in the next 5 years, is really experimenting a little bit more and being critical and not being scared of poking at something critically, because that's what art is about, right? Or that's what we want to do as artists.
I had a very good thought and it flew away.
Well, so can I talk about the flower?
Yes, that was exactly what so we're thinking again. Okay, so I was going to ask you about the freaking million writing retreats that you've gone on now, and I too had no idea that when scholars go on these writing retreats, like thinking it's like a vacation.
I thought they were all facilitated. Like I thought people sign up to go on a writing retreat and then there's programming. There is that, right? But it's actually just self-imposed. So you book someplace and then you write for that period. And so I did one in the very exotic North Vancouver.
Listen, let me just put it out there first that you had originally booked on Bowen Island, and you were nervous because there's no car, like there's no Uber or like, whatever, or cabs, because I guess everything halted during the pandemic. And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure it's just like island culture. Like you just hitchhike. Like people are very friendly. They'll pick you up. Like it's literally that culture. And you were like, no.
And then so I was
scared.
at Bowen. I was like, this is weird. Like I'm not gonna do that. And then I was at Bowen this past weekend, and I sent you a picture. They literally have a sign like this, and it says, "This is where you line up to hitchhike." I was like, oh my god.
In any case, you rebooked. You canceled the Bowen so that you found it a different place in North Van. Okay, now we can talk about the flower.
And you know that I got so much writing done in that first writing retreat that I booked 2 more. But I wanted to talk about the one that I went to last.
This girl fell in love, y'all.
So this woman had these, I think they're called a Sirius flower. Apparently it's the flower in Crazy Rich Asians. I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm.
But so she told me, and I seen these at one of my friends' weddings, Daphne's wedding, where it started to bloom. So these bloom for one at night and for one night only. They die in the morning.
Wow.
And they smell just incredible. They're like just, and they look, I wish I pulled up a picture of when they're closed too, because they look so alien. Like they totally look like out of this world.
Yes.
And normally, so she usually only gets like 1 or 2 blooms a year, but because of global warming, the plant thinks it's in the tropics. And I saw 4 blooms while I was there for 4 days.
Wow. I had
Yeah.
no idea it was that many. I knew it was like 2
yeah.
nights. You were like, oh my God, it bloomed again.
Yeah. Yeah, it was incredible. Yeah. Anyway, I just had to share that because as you can probably tell now, I'm a little bit obsessed with flowers.
You have like floral tattoos.
I do.
Listen, I have never met anyone who has first of all, such good taste in general, but also for as long as I've known you, you have always had fresh flowers in a vase. A vase at your place. I remember it from your old place. And then your other place, your last place, and then your current place. Like flowers everywhere, so fresh.
Well, maybe I'll just share a story too, because there is a story connected to like both my mother and my dad's oldest sister Alice are very into flowers, and Alice, who I'm quite close with, has a whole garden of these beautiful, like the entire property is surrounded by these maroon colored peonies, and they're just beautiful, which is why my sleeve is these these peonies.
Gorgeous. Excuse me.
We're running out of time.
We are running out of time. I was just going to crack a joke how it's amazing how different you and I are, because I detest flowers. I love that you love them and they look beautiful around you and on you, but I'm much more of a plant person than I am flowers. And I always joke that when I was dating, like, please don't get me flowers, like get me a plant instead.
Oh, I'm the total opposite. I will.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be like, I will order the flowers. Just e-transfer me, please. I'm kidding.
Are you?
Kind of. I wonder, maybe we have 3 minutes. Why don't we end with sort of visions for season 3?
Okay. Well, I think, right. I still want the idea of like former guests in conversation with each other. I think that would be really, really fascinating.
Well, why don't we also maybe mention, so we're brewing this we have a lot of artwork that's coming out around engaging Chinatown, including the Biennale thing that we just showed.
Biannual,
sorry. But we also got some grants to work on anti-Asian racism. But one of the things that we're, I think, really thinking through is that, you know, especially with the conversation that we had with Dylan last week, and really thinking about, you know, anti-Asian racism is not exceptional to other types of racism, specifically anti-Black and colonizations and anti-Indigenous racism. And so how do we tell that story that is intersectional and interrogates the formation of anti-racism within the broader structure of racism, so that we don't replicate the same system of racial hierarchy, right?
Yep.
That's sort of the dilemma that we're having. So those PSAs we're hoping to launch in February.
We're not doing PSAs. That
doing
we're getting tricked up by the word. I think we put in. We said in the application we had written PSAs because it's easy to understand, but they're not PSAs because as soon as you try to make a PSA, then you run into like replicating. It'll just be very boba liberal, you know.
Yeah.
And we don't want that.
But yeah, so we're going to launch these pieces probably alongside a panel series. And we'll likely link, I think, season 3 around these themes, but also, of course, inviting other guests that we want to talk to along the broader conversations that we want to have around these issues. So
yeah.
And
excited. For people that are familiar with us and our past events, you'll know that we will do a lot of activation events because we love activations.
Yes.
And next year, it's going to be Year of the Water Tiger.
Yes.
It's our
year.
Although traditionally, like the superstition is if it's your year, it's actually bad luck or something. But my parents never follow that, so I'm not going to follow that.
I'm a Leo. We don't do that. All good luck. We're very, very good luck.
As Nancy Lee, who is our board member at Love Intersections and our dear friend and also past guest of Hot Pot Talk says, big Leo energy drop. All right. Well, David, I just want to say happy birthday again.
Thank you. This is such a kind gesture, if I may use that word.
I had to interrupt our live stream, you know, and just it's always been about levity for us.
Yeah.
And it had to be fun. So I want to keep it fun, keep it full of heart and laughter and also good stuff. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a good night.
See you at season 3.
Season 3.